Hi friends, welcome to QApedia and this is our blog qapedia.com. Today we are going to discuss the topic test scenario, and the subtopics that we will discuss today are what is a test scenario, how to write a test scenario, examples of test scenario. First example will be calculator, second example that we will see will be of e-commerce application, then importance of test scenario, then the summary of the session, and then question for the session. So let's start. Now, what is a test scenario? In the last session, we had discussed about software testing terms or software testing terminologies, and there were a lots of terms that we listed out. We are going to talk about one of the testing term, and that is test scenario. Test scenario is made up of two words, test and scenario. First of all, we should know what is a scenario. Scenario is an English word which simply means description of a possible event. Okay, so any event which is happening, for that we are describing something. Now if we have to understand this scenario in software testing, then what can we say? That when we do a software testing, then we generally test the functionality of a software, or we can say that we test features of a software. So before doing testing for the features, we need to identify all the features that we have to test, and then we have to describe them like a scenario. So what are we doing? We are describing the functionality or features of a software like a scenario. So it becomes a scenario. Okay, so scenario in these terms, like we have seen, the scenario is an English word which simply means description of possible event. So in software testing, scenario will be description of features. Okay, now because we are writing them for testing purpose, so we call them test scenarios. Okay, so we can say the test scenarios is a description of a possible functionality. Okay, we call it test condition also, test possibility, and test functionality also. But the most popular word is test scenario. Now if suppose we want to define it, then test scenarios are one liner statement, a very high level documentation of a functionality or a requirement or of a feature which describes that what are we going to test in that particular functionality or in that particular requirement. Okay, so test scenarios are one liner statement. It is very high level documentation of functionality or requirement. And what does it describe? It describe what are we going to test in the functionality or in the requirement. So test scenarios are derived from requirement document or from user story. Okay, so requirement document could be a functional requirement document, or it could be a business requirement document. So this is very important, that test scenarios will be derived from requirement document or from user story. Okay, now how to write a test scenario? We have to follow some steps to write test scenario. We have to read the requirement document properly. Requirement document could be anything like functional requirement document or business requirement document or user story. Then requirement document will contain requirements. So we have to analyze those requirements from the requirement document. Okay, and what does it mean by requirement? Requirement means the functionality or the feature of the software. Then we have to think of the possible outcomes for each requirement. Okay, then we have to write one liner scenario for each possible outcome. Then we have to map each test scenario with at least one requirement document, and we will create a requirement traceability matrix. Okay, this matrix will help us in mapping the test scenarios with requirements, and then we will send the scenarios to business team for reviewing purpose. The business team will review the test scenario. Now let's see examples of test scenario. So let's see the first example. The first example will be of calculator. So let's take an example of a project where developers are building or developing a calculator. So a calculator will have some functionalities like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So we can say that we can have four or more than four test scenarios because calculator is having four functionalities or four features. So let's see the example of test scenarios. Suppose we'll write one scenario for addition, that will be add two numbers. One test scenario for subtraction, subtract two numbers. One test scenario for multiplication, multiply two numbers. One test scenario for division, divide two numbers. So test scenario 1, 2, 3 and 4. But if suppose we want to write more test scenarios, then even that is possible. So let's make a table. In the table, in one column requirements will be there, and in one column test scenario will be there. So requirement, suppose we are writing test scenario for addition requirement. So for addition requirement, what could be the test scenario? Add two numbers, add three numbers, add a positive and a negative number. This could be one scenario. Then for subtraction, what could be the test scenario? Subtract a small number from big number, subtract a big number from small number, subtract a positive and a negative number. Then in multiplication requirement, what could be the test scenario? Multiply a positive and a negative number, multiply two positive numbers, multiply two negative numbers. So this way we can write some test scenarios for each functionality. Okay, now let's take one more example. The example will be of e-commerce application, and in this example let's see one more example where we are supposed to test an e-commerce application, and we need to write test scenarios for the features that we should be testing in that. So what could be the features or functionalities in an e-commerce application? So here is some list of those features. Create account or register customer, login, search a product, browse a product, product list page, product details page, add to cart functionality, shopping cart or shopping bag functionality, checkout page, order confirmation page, emails like order confirmation, cancellation, those emails, order cancellation functionality, order returns functionality, refunds functionality. Now if suppose we have to write test scenarios for the above functionality, then we can write it in below manner. Like we can take a table where we can write functionality in one column, test scenario in one column. And suppose we are writing test scenario for this functionality, create account or register customer. So what can we write? That test the create account functionality with email ID and mobile number. So we can test this particular functionality, that are we able to create account with email ID or mobile number or not. Then login functionality, the test login functionality for valid and invalid credentials. So what happens when we try to log in with a valid and invalid credentials, that we have to check. Then search product functionality. So test the search functionality and ensure that the products are correctly displayed based on the user search criteria. So suppose we are on a retail e-commerce website which sells clothes, and we are trying to search for jeans. So if suppose we are searching for jeans, then only jeans should be displayed, nothing else should be displayed. If suppose we are searching for a polo shirt, then only polo shirt should be displayed, nothing else should be displayed. That kind of testing we'll do. And browse product, so we have to test the browse functionality and we have to ensure that products are displaying correctly. Product list page, so whenever we search for some product like jeans or polo, whenever we browse some product, then there will be a lots of products, there will be a list of products will be displayed in that page. So that page is called product list page. So we have to test that particular page with search and browse functionality, like that product list page should only have jeans if we are searching for jeans, it should only have polo if we are searching for polo, that kind of testing. Then product display details page, if suppose we have clicked on some product in this particular page, then it will take us to this product details page, and then we have to check for product description and pricing information, those information are correctly displaying or not. These kind of test scenarios we can write for a particular application. like whether it's calculator or e-commerce application. Now, what is the importance of a test scenario? So if suppose we create test scenarios for all the requirements, then it is ensured that we have covered each and every requirement. That means 100% coverage is ensured. Then it is a very fast way to identify the most important functionality to be tested if we will write test scenario, because assigning priorities to test scenarios is very easy and fast. Okay, then test scenarios are one-liner statements, so it is very easy for business analysts and other stakeholders to go through it and review it. So these three are the are the importance of test scenario. That's why we write test scenario. Then let's take a look at the summary of the session. So we have discussed below topics in the session: what is a test scenario, how to write a test scenario, examples of test scenario, and then importance of test scenario. Now, if suppose we are talking about the question for today's session of this session is write test scenarios for online banking application. You can provide your answers in the comment section. So that's it for the session. And if you want to get the notes for this particular session, you can go to this blog qapedia.com and get the notes for this session. Thank you guys.